Welcome back to the Rogue Wave podcast, the frequency for all things pop culture. One of those things is Hawkeye, which is now out on Disney+. It actually debuted last week, but we were busy reviewing Ghostbusters Afterlife. Plus, we wanted to give our audience the opportunity to actually consume all 3 episodes before we dove in with our reaction. Because, right, it's like halfway over already now. 3 episodes in, right? We're done?
I suppose so. Yeah.
Right?
We're through it. I mean, we're never going to be done with it. We can watch it as many times as we want over and over and over again. So we're technically not done, but I mean, yeah, the first run aspect of it will be over.
Yeah, we're already halfway through this thing. So what was your initial reaction to Hawkeye? And then I'll give you my complaint with what I've seen so far.
So I already know you're going to complain about it. So great. So now I got to choose whether I like it. It's very charming. Mm-hmm. But it's lighthearted. I do like the fact it's like Ant-Man. I do like the fact that sometimes the MCU can be not about some kind of cataclysmic villain that's trying to destroy the world or control time, or some kind of horrible trauma felt by one of the characters because someone died, or some kind of racial evolution and reparation of spirit or something like that.
Yeah.
So like this is just a guy trying to get home for Christmas. That's I like the lightness of it. Plus there's some action to it. I like Haley Steinfeld. I think she's pretty solid performance whenever she gives it. Like I believe whoever she says she's is.
She's fantastic. No, she's fantastic. She's a terrific actress and really seems to embrace this role that she's put into.
Yeah. And I like Jeremy Renner. I mean,
How can you
and
not?
I like that they lean into I like the 2 things about it. I like that they lean into him being like the kind of unsung Avenger. And they have the Whedonisms, the meta talk about him, like branding, that kind of stuff, the marketing that he needs to do to get his due. But I also like that he was probably, completely leveled up and probably one of the worst villains of the MCU when he was Ronin, right?
Sure.
In his own weird way,
right?
At least morally. He wasn't a villain as in the sense that he was against the heroes, but morally he was lost, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so apparently he has got some incredible fighting skills, that was fueled by his grief for losing his entire family.
Yeah.
And I like that they kind of lean into that, but they're not going super dark on that. But it's probably going to end up that way, So I'm enjoying it so far.
Yeah. So the 3rd episode redeems my complaint slightly with the introduction. And again, if you haven't seen the 3rd episode, spoilers. It's not too deep of a spoiler. They introduce a new villain called Echo, which we know from the comics. I actually believe she was a Daredevil villain, if I recall correctly, originally. But so it kind of quells my complaint by introducing her, because she seems to be a little more of a threat, or seems to have at least some sort of gravitas to her, as opposed to what we saw in the first 2 episodes. So I pose this question. It's not even really a question. I pose a statement, I should say. I came in to Hawkeye based on the trailers and based on what we saw. It's Christmas themed. A lot of explosions seem to be something that could materialize to this. Expecting more Die Hard. What I got, because of the bumbling idiot kind of villains, which seems to be an MCU stock and trade, we got more Home Alone. I got more Home Alone. I got this feeling that I'm watching the 2 burglars trying to break in and stop Macaulay Culkin. The vibe, obviously not a direct analogy to that, rather than the John McClane. You even said it, the guy trying to get home for Christmas. John McClane trying to save his marriage during Christmas, coming out to L.A. and meeting, trying to reconcile with his wife, or try to salvage the marriage, this kind of thing. The difference, though, Die Hard had a threat in the villain, in the main antagonist, or the stakes were always there. In this, the first 2 episodes especially, it kind of lost me when we got into the silent auction. It lost me when, okay, Kate Bishop is going to go and find, she's going to follow the guy who threatened her mom. Okay, and then there's this silent auction. This is great. Okay, kind of cool. But then, boom, walls explode. These thugs kind of come in. Again, they're not even that bumbling at that point just yet. But then as soon as they get out to the surface, the guy just conveniently raises his mask up for some reason, which was a little bit of a bumbling move. And then the rest of the episodes kind of just... I don't get that the Tracksuit Mafia. Now, it was based on the comic, the Tracksuit Draculas, which was the villain in the Kate Bishop series, in the Young Avengers series the Hawkeye series that she starred in the comics, which I haven't read. I just know the details of it. But MCU just continues to have this problem, I feel like, where they lean a little too much on the humor or the comedy, and I don't feel there's any stakes. I don't feel like, I know the hero's not going to die necessarily. It's not the point. The point is I don't feel like these heroes seem to realize. Kate Bishop, this is the first time she's engaging in any of this. This should not be, the Joss Whedon wisecracking. Clint Barton at least has equity of, the X amount of Avengers movies and or Captain America movies and or just Marvel movies he's now appeared in, to the point where you're like, okay, this guy's built up equity. I get it. Kate Bishop, no, I don't get it. And to me, that felt, it hurt. It hurt watching it because I felt there's so much potential. Now, again, we're only 3 episodes in, and by the 3rd episode, the action does redeem it, because I thought the 3rd episode was a lot of fun. It was, and the action scenes were really exciting. But I'm nervous that we're not going to get we're going to get a similar fate that a lot of Marvel movies have suffered from, which is just a ho-hum villain.
Okay, I hear you.
Do you think that is?
I do not agree with you, of course, because I would have said that when you asked me. But I hear what you're saying.
Is it a valid?
I mean, it's not.
Is it a valid argument?
I suppose it's how could it not be valid if that's your opinion?
Well, again, do you agree?
That's
with
just
that?
not how I feel about it. I don't know if it's valid. I didn't get that impression. Like I watched it for what it was. Like, that's the other thing. Like, it seems like you come to some of these things with expectations. Mm-hmm. I don't really have expectations, so I'm like, oh, that's what they're doing, and then I decide whether I like what they're doing or they don't. But if it's like I look at something and I'm like, oh, this is going to be exactly like Die Hard, or this is going to be like that, and then then you got Die Hard expectations to it. I'm not saying that is a wrong thing to do. I'm saying that's the reason I don't do that, is because my expectations are always going to be greater than what I get. I've learned to do that. I've learned not to do that a long time ago, because I always like, oh, this is going to be the most amazing thing because this is going to happen. And then there's going to be this godlike creature that's going to come down and zap someone. And it's going to be this, and it never turns out to be that. It always turns out to be a little smaller than my overblown expectations, suggested it would be. So basically I tend not to do that for that particular reason. Yeah. Like the speculation, that's what we were talking about. Speculation ruins your ability to enjoy things. After a while, over the years, I was realizing I wasn't enjoying almost anything I was watching because I had these like overblown expectations of what they should have been. Or, like if I was telling the story, I would have done this and that. And then I realized, okay, well then you tell your own stories and either stop watching or consuming this kind of material, or learn to appreciate the material for what it is.
But here's the thing, and this is where I'll digress from what you're saying. I hear you.
I'm talking about myself, though.
I hear you.
That's what you should do.
I felt as if the opening, inciting incident in the first episode, all the way up to the auction, was setting up my expectations properly. And I don't mean that I came in like, oh, I'm expecting Die Hard out of this. Necessarily, but I sat there going, wow, okay, they're setting up some legit threats, they're setting up some legit stakes, they're setting up some legit expectations by what I was actually watching. And then as soon as they get into that silent auction, and she just happens to put the Ronin thing on, and that's where all of a sudden it took me out of what I was watching, and it never brought me back to those expectations that they had initially, I thought, set up.
Okay, I mean, like, the other thing is you're also studying something that's like a quarter of the way done or halfway done, right? That's like us giving a review on half of the first half of Ghostbusters. Like a lot of things that haven't paid off yet will seem like they're going astray while you're watching it. You're like, this is not gonna match up. But I don't know what they're trying to do with this. And they're gonna do the Hell Dogs again, and they're doing Gozer again, and like this is not gonna work.
Yeah.
And then once you see it wrapped up, you're like, oh, you know what? They wrapped it up quite nicely. I thought it was gonna do this other thing, and it didn't. And it did this thing, which I completely didn't expect.
Yeah.
Or it will wrap up, and you'll be like, it's exactly what I thought it was going to be. The trouble that I thought it was going to run into. So,
yeah,
I mean...
and agreed. I mean, look, we acknowledge it's the first half. We acknowledge... I even acknowledge that Episode 3 was a much better pick-me-up from what we saw in the first two. I just hope this doesn't go the way that many Marvel series and shows have gone to this point, where we get a lackluster villain when all is said and done. And, almost to a point, I think we talked about this in pre-production, are we watching this for what the actual results on screen are, or we're just watching it because we just want to keep up to date with the universe,
Well, I mean, that's part of it. That's half of it, right? But the other half of it is just I'm just experiencing what they're giving me, right? And I'll decide, like, the only reason I would not like this stuff is that when I put it into a comparison with something else and say, well, it wasn't Loki, but ultimately I'm enjoying it so far. So I don't really have issues with it, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Is Hawkeye more Die Hard or more Home Alone, or neither? Is it a Christmas movie? We'll open that debate another time.
I'm not getting into that one.
When we
I
come
want
back,
no part of it.
More Rogue Wave podcast.